President Trump sending a letter moments ago to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. We'll tell you what it says next. Plus, a winter wallop on the way. Who could get hit by the hardest impending storm of the year, and why snow is not the only trip after the shutdown in light of, quote, 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay. He added that it would be better if she were in Washington negotiating to end the shutdown. So let's bring in Colin Reed. He's a senior vice president of Definers Public Affairs and former executive director of America Rising. Greg Speed is president of America Votes. So I think, Colin, let me start with you. I think we were texting back and forth this morning thinking today there was going to be some sort of response from the White House that coming in the form of a letter saying that President Trump has the ability to cancel her military plane to go on this congressional delegation trip. They're called a CODEL. Saying you can fly commercial if you like, but it would probably really be better if you stayed here to try to help me with the shutdown. So now the ball is back in her court. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like that's going to help this the situation get resolved. And I think we were just talking backstage about how there's no end in sight for this shutdown, and that seems to be the way it's going to continue, with both sides increasingly dug in and playing to their respective bases. So I would say it's not all that surprising coming from the counterpuncher, but I don't know how this is ultimately going to end the situation.
Mm-hmm. Greg, what do you think about that? I mean, Nancy Pelosi yesterday initially said that she wanted the president to reschedule the State of the Union based on security concerns, but today in her press conference basically said she doesn't think it's an appropriate thing to do for him to give a speech while there's 800,000 workers without pay in the federal government.
Yeah, that's right. And that's essentially what Speaker Pelosi's letter said yesterday. Look, this is unfortunate, this tit for tat. Speaker Pelosi certainly, I think, took the right step in saying, let's open the government before you come and give a State of the Union. I think that the comments regarding the security, et cetera, she was being gracious. She was giving essentially an out and essentially saying, now's not the time. And, we can't, with 800,000 lives in the balance, actually many more, 800,000 federal employees, livelihoods in the balance, we're not going to have business as usual. And, we need to think first and foremost about them. They are paying the price for this. The rest of this is a tit for tat.
Let me stop you there for a moment, Greg, because I want to bring in Peter Doocy. He knows more about Pelosi's trip, and in a way, I think that the president kind of did them a favor, because if they had gone on this CODEL during the shutdown, that would have been terrible for them.
We don't know exactly what the president, which trip or when this trip was scheduled for. A lot of the time, these congressional delegations, which are often made up of Democrats and Republicans, will not publicize where they're going to be until afterwards because of operational security, especially if they're going to a place like Afghanistan. In terms of the timing of a CODEL during the shutdown, we also don't know exactly when this 7-day excursion that the president is referring to would have happened. It's possible that it could have been scheduled for next week, but House Democrats have already canceled their recess for next week. They're going to be here, even though they're traditionally off for the Martin Luther King
So it's like, you can't
week.
break up with me. I've already broken up with you.
Basically.
So then what's the next step there that you think is going to be on Capitol Hill? This is the date of the State of the Union, the idea of a CODEL that might not even have been taking place next week. And yet, do you see any sense that these Republicans and Democrats are working behind the scenes to try to figure out a way to go forward? That the president might accept a little bit less money for border security. The Democrats might be able to take him up on some of the things he's offered, like temporary workers for the ag community, or H-1B visa holders having a path to citizenship. I mean, there is stuff here on the table.
But there is nobody at the table right now. And again, we're seeing the issue. It's not even 3 o'clock on a Thursday, and they don't even have enough members in Washington, D.C. right now to have a recorded vote on a bill to fund the government. It's obviously something that they voted on a couple times already, and it's not going anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate. But as the shutdown wears on, members are still going home for long weekends like this one, and that really limits the ability to have an in-person or behind closed doors meaningful negotiation, because there's just nobody around.
All right, Peter Doocy, stick around. We're going to bring our panel back right after this. Colin Reed and Greg Speed, don't go away.
Hey, Dana,
we'll be right back. Yes, Peter?
Dana. Okay. I do have one more thing.
Go ahead.
John Roberts is sending out that Pelosi was supposed to leave at 3 o'clock today.
For that trip? The Codell?
And so that's not happening. So she could even, the Codell.
She might have been
I've got
on
a
her
note
way
here
to the
from
airport.
John Roberts. It says, well, if your flight's supposed to leave at 3 o'clock and it's about a half-an-hour drive from the Capitol, it's possible that they were sitting over there. But it says, not going, postponing the Codell. Pelosi would have been out of the country Tuesday at midnight when the next pay period happens. So
that's remarkable. He probably just helped them, actually.
She might be sitting there for a while waiting for it to come off the plane.
Amazing and terrific timing if you are trying to get a shot in. Okay, stick around, Peter and Colin. The State of the Union address. All of this regarding the shutdown. We are working on bringing up a picture for you of a Air Force bus that is idling outside of the Rayburn office building, House office building. It has Capitol Hill police escort that was apparently headed to the airport to leave on this trip, which I can't believe that they were going on a trip in the middle of the shutdown anyway. So the president might have saved them some embarrassment. But now they're also embarrassed because they're probably going to have to get off that bus, and they're not going on their trip, at least not by a military aircraft. Let's bring in Brett Baer, anchor of Special Report. It's good to have you here. A little drama. I knew something was going to happen today. I just had a feeling. Okay, so your thoughts on this. The president didn't respond to Nancy Pelosi at all, not by tweet, not by anything. And then today, just a half hour before this trip, drops this letter to them.
Well, it's quite a move, isn't it? And it is quite a response. It will get a lot of attention. And for those lawmakers sitting on that bus that's idling on Capitol Hill, just a block away from where I'm sitting, they have no clue what is exactly going on. But that plane is not taking off because, while the money has been appropriated for the Defense Department and it could be paid for, obviously, this is the commander-in-chief. And the 89th Flight Wing responds to the commander-in-chief. So the military is not flying if the commander-in-chief says, don't go.
Don't go. Let me ask you this. What were the members of Congress thinking going on a Codell, the congressional delegation trip? That's the code word for it, Codell. Why were they going to go overseas to Belgium, Egypt? I understand why you're going to Afghanistan. But in the middle of a shutdown, that seems foolhardy to me.
It does seem like bad timing. You know how these things go, though. They get set up months in advance. They line up all of the dignitaries that they're going to meet with on the ground, and it's just a matter of scheduling. This one happened to be scheduled in the middle of the longest shutdown that probably a lot of people thought would be wrapped up by now. It hasn't been. On the defense of congressional delegations, they do learn a lot from being overseas.
Yes.
And you know all that, and especially when it comes to Afghanistan, to be able to have first-hand knowledge from the military people on the ground. But you're right, it doesn't give the right impression during a shutdown.
Especially the Speaker of the House, who she's newly the Speaker. She's in this position of power. She is in the position to negotiate with the President if they're willing to do so. So as we wait to see if we can get this picture up of this bus that's idling out there, we'll have to see if it skirts away sort of quietly. What else are you hearing about the possibility of any discussion? The President today in his speech at the Defense Department said there are a lot of Democrats who want Nancy Pelosi to allow them to negotiate, but she's in their way. Is that something you're hearing?
Yeah, I have heard that from several people, especially on the Senate side, that there are a number of conversations ongoing. I had the House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, on Special Report last night. He suggested that a compromise is possible. He also, by the way, suggested that walls work in some places on the border. And it does seem like there is a bit of a turning point as far as holding the line on that walls are immoral line. For the Speaker. Take
a look at this picture, Brett. We finally have that here. That's the Air Force bus that was ready to go with U.S. Capitol Police escort. I assume they were probably going out to Joint Base Andrews, I would imagine. And then now I don't even know if they were loaded yet, but they're not going to be getting on that bus, or they're not going to be going on this particular Codell unless they fly commercial.
Chad Pergram just did a 320, which is kind of our alert system here in D.C., and said that there were lawmakers on that bus, and that he's got sound from Elliot Engel, who was supposed to be on this trip, that we should be able to play here pretty soon. Here's the thing. The Speaker did the original layout of the State of the Union shouldn't go forward because of security. We didn't hear from the President, but now we're hearing from the President, and he's making his feelings clear through this move.
And she does have the right to invite her, but she didn't really disinvite. It was one of those things where I really think it would be better, Mr. President, if you were to change the date. Now, she's not saying there would not be a State of the Union at all. She's saying let's reschedule it for a date after we get the government workers back to work. We're also finding out from John Roberts at the White House that the trip was a DOD, Department of Defense trip, not a State Department trip. Just another little nugget there to add to this. Your thoughts, Brett, then about any pressure that the White House or the Democrats or Republicans on Capitol Hill are feeling about workers who are really starting to feel the pinch. We've heard reports about food banks being set up for FBI employees and Coast Guard employees. We know that there are a number of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck, and this is really starting to bite.
It is. You know, there's a restaurant right down the street from us, Charlie Palmer's. A lot of us go for lunch sometimes, and they're offering furloughed federal employees free chicken sandwiches. Other businesses around D.C. are doing the same. And you are seeing some of that. And I do think there will be a moment here, a fulcrum point, where somebody has to get to the table. There has to be some negotiation back and forth, and that's what I tried to press Majority Leader Hoyer about last night. He suggested that it was coming, but so far we haven't seen it, and I think you're going to see this pressure. The next pay period is Tuesday at midnight, and so they're hoping to get something through before then.
And just interesting to point on that Nancy Pelosi and the rest of this CODEL would not have been in the country when this next pay period is missed, if they were going to go on this trip that the president has now canceled just a half hour before they were supposed to leave. We appreciate you jumping into the seat there, Brett Baier. Thank you, and we'll check in with you later. And also, of course, we will watch Special Report. Let's bring back our panel, Colin Reed and Greg Speed. So, Colin, you've heard all of that. Your thoughts about Congress thinking a CODEL would be a good thing to do right now?
You know, perception is reality these days, and if you're traveling around the world and not in D.C. negotiating, I think it sends a message that you're not very serious about getting anything done. But frankly, Nancy Pelosi made that pretty clear yesterday with her stunts about the State of the Union. So, and this isn't the first travel-related PR headache that she's endured. Remember that trip to Hawaii over Christmas that could have been avoided. Again, the stakes are high. This is divided government, and if you want to show you're serious about negotiating, which I'm not sure she is, then you should probably be here and at the negotiating table. And
Greg, we don't have a manifest of who was supposed to be on this CODEL. Presumably it was a bipartisan group. They usually are, these congressional delegations, when they go overseas. But probably not a good idea to be gone when this pay period is going to be missed. If the president's sitting at the White House, hasn't left, and is at least using the bully pulpit to try to get them to negotiate.
Yes, I would certainly concur that we don't know who is going to be on this plan. And oftentimes, these CODELs are requests made formally from the leadership, from the Speaker's office. So we don't know whether or not Speaker Pelosi would have actually been on this CODEL, at least not so far. Look, I think, as I said a few minutes back, you know, business as usual is really, you know, I think not acceptable right now. And that's true all around and on both sides. With 800,000 furloughed federal workers, I think it is a time for the normal operations beyond the work of ending this shutdown to take a back seat. And that includes a State of the Union and maybe also a congressional delegation trip like this.
Colin, I'll just give you a quick last word about these workers that we're talking about. You know, 78% of full-time workers are, live paycheck to paycheck. 70% of all workers do. This is when do you think that this starts to have an effect where people realize we got to get to the table and get this done?
Yeah, I think those folks who aren't getting paid right now are going to start making their voices heard. But I would add it goes beyond just government workers. The majority of the country, the vast majority of this country lives paycheck to paycheck.
Yes,
and I think it's the reason
that number is not just government workers that I'm showing there. That is in America. So this is a crunch time for them, for all of us, and for certainly the White House and Capitol Hill to get together. Colin Reed and Greg Speed, thank you. We'll have an update from the White House after this. Fox News Alert, it's 2 p.m. in New York, and we're following several big stories this hour. Nancy Pelosi doubling down on her call to delay President Trump's State of the Union address. Michael Cohen appearing to confirm a report that he paid a company to rig polls for President Trump. And the Northeast bracing for a massive winter storm that is threatening to drop as much as 40 inches of snow. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Republicans accusing Nancy Pelosi of playing politics with the State of the Union. The Speaker pushing back, saying Secret Service agents should not be asked to work even if they are not getting paid. The partial government shutdown now in its 27th day. Peter Ducey is live on Capitol Hill. Peter, how are Democrats trying to pressure Republicans into giving up on wall money and voting to end the shutdown?
Dana, Virginia's Democratic senators are about to share the stage here on the Senate side with some air traffic controllers. They're making the case that the stress of missing paychecks is starting to take its toll on the people most directly responsible, other than pilots, for making sure the planes land and take off and taxi safely. A few blocks away from here right now, there is a group of furloughed federal workers that are protesting as well at the Republican retreat that is underway at Nationals Ballpark today. And that's as Democrats in the House introduce the Immediate Financial Relief for Federal Employees Act.
Some of you may remember when GM needed some extra cash. They were in a tough time. The government was there for them. When Wall Street needed a bailout, that government was there for them. When other companies needed their assistance, the government's been there to them. It's time for the government to step up for the hardworking families of our nation.
And a few minutes ago on the floor of the House of Representatives, the minority whip, Steve Scalise, asked the Democrats in control for a fresh vote on a resolution to fund the government. But the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, said they couldn't do it today because too many members have already flown home for the weekend. Thursday at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, it was an early weekend. So do the Republicans have any alternative locations or any thoughts about hosting the State of the Union somewhere else if Speaker Pelosi doesn't change course?
There are some Republicans now saying that if the House is going to be closed and they can't do the State of the Union there, then maybe Republicans should just invite the president to the chamber that they still control, the Senate.
I think that's a real affront to the American people, and what I would suggest is that Senator McConnell's in charge of the Senate. Let's host it in the Senate. This would be the first time in history that the House would deny a president the forum of speaking. If she's going to do that, let's hold it in the Senate.
Republicans should be back from their retreat within the next 2 hours or so, so we should have a chance to ask them how much talk there was or was not about possibly breaking precedent to invite the president to speak.
Right, breaking precedent for the president. Very well done, Peter Ducey. Thank you for that. For more on this, let's bring in Olivier Knox. He's chief Washington correspondent for Sirius XM. Take a listen, Olivier, to what Nancy Pelosi said earlier today at her press conference.
The date of the State of the Union is not a sacred date. It's not constitutionally required. It's not the president's birthday. It's not anything. It is a date that we agreed to. I'm not denying reply from all. We're saying let's get a date when government is open. Let's pay the employees. Maybe he thinks it's okay not to pay people who do work. I don't.
What about the original reason that she stated, Olivier, which was that there was a security concern? That now gone by the wayside?
It sounds like it. I mean, the original concern was not a specific security threat. It was the status of the State of the Union as a national security special event. As you know, the executive branch is required to furnish a list of those. They typically include things like the Super Bowl or party nominating conventions and, of course, the State of the Union. That has now shifted over to an argument that they should, all the staff who would ensure that security need to be paid.
Listen then to the president today. He was at Pentagon. He was talking about missile defense, which we're going to talk about later, but he also mentioned the border and this issue.
While many Democrats in the House and Senate would like to make a deal, Speaker Pelosi will not let them negotiate. The party has been hijacked by the open borders fringe within the party. The radical left becoming the radical Democrats. Hopefully, Democrat lawmakers will step forward to do what is right for our country.
Olivier, do you think that the president heard that yesterday from Democrats who were there at the White House from the Problem Solvers Caucus? They were there with their Republican counterparts. Do you think that's what they told him?
They may have. That certainly would be along the lines of their MO. I don't know about many Democrats contacting the White House to say that they want to make a deal, although a lot of Democrats have said this shutdown is silly. But if they are making those comments, they're keeping those pretty pretty close to the vest.
So right before this show started, Harris Faulkner reported on Outnumbered Overtime that apparently the State Department has ordered back workers overseas and saying that they're going to find some money to do that. The IRS is bringing back employees, the Agriculture Department bringing back employees, offshore oil drilling coming back. I mean, so if the government has the power to do this, where do we go from here if they can nitpick what they want to do?
That's a really good question, whether government has the power to do this. I don't know that we've tested it on this scale before. The State Department, I think, is getting money for only a couple of pay periods, and after that, it's well, they're going to see what they can do. You know, obviously, I've seen the same reporting you have that some number of federal workers are saying that it's chronically unfair to force them to work without pay.
But yet we haven't seen too many of them saying not showing up to work, as we've been showing, you know, the TSA agents, obviously good public servants that are showing up and doing their jobs. Wanted to read this to you from Karl Rove column. He writes in the Wall Street Journal on Thursdays. He was talking about the shutdown and the next election. He said, a base-only strategy is perilous bet for 2020. The party that realizes this first may gain the edge in the coming presidential contest. Mr. Trump won last time because he rallied enough voters who didn't like him but abhorred his opponent, yet he hasn't grown his base since taking office. It's time to start. But isn't that also true for the Democrats? I mean, they're going to have to win over their base plus if they want to win in 2020. And the shutdown, maybe it'll be forgotten by 2020, but it's having a lasting impact now.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because it's an eternity in American politics between now and November of 2020. In terms of whether the Democrats could do a base plus strategy, I think they just showed they could in the midterms. But again, you're right. We're so far off from that. It seems like, I mean, when's the last time a government shutdown had a discernible, detectable, provable impact on a national election? I can't really think of one. You know, maybe some sour feelings in '98, but I don't think we're going to see the shutdown be a prime argument when we get to November 2020.
But there will be plenty of arguments before 2020. That's for sure. We just don't know what they will be. All right, Olivier Knox, thanks for coming. I like the beard. We appreciate you being here.